OTAs are officially upon us as we enter the third phase of the offseason program, but the Seahawks will be missing two notable stars returning from injury as they kick things off at the VMAC. Should Jamal Adams and Jordyn Brooks be expected to be there or not? We're going to be breaking it all down in our newest installment of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined for this early Thursday episode by my co-host, Dallas Cooper, and a special thanks, as always, to all the 12 Seahawks first listen days a week. OTAs are officially upon us at the VMAC, the third phase of the offseason program kicking off, but the Seahawks will be missing a couple key players. We'll be discussing that, plus taking a look at the depth chart on offense and defense with rosters pretty much set in stone at this point. Where have the Seahawks improved the most? What are the biggest question marks? What are the biggest wild cards? We'll be breaking down the depth chart on both sides of the ball. Jam-packed episode coming your way, so let's get to it. Now for your lead story here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. The Seahawks will officially kick off OTAs beginning next Monday. They will be open to reporters for, I believe, 3 of those practices. They get 10 total. Minicamp will be in the middle of those OTAs, second year in a row. They've done that. This is an exciting time of year, Dallas, for fans because you get to see players, at least you get to hear some information about players being back in the field, even if they're not playing real football, contact being prohibited. You also are going to get plenty of storylines that are going to create some vitriol from reporters, media members, and fans alike when it comes to players, whether they choose to report or not. And one name in particular, Jamal Adams, coming off the torn quad injury. He is not going to be in Seattle for OTAs. Neither is Jordyn Brooks. He's coming off a torn ACL. Both of them still in Texas to continue their rehab. And this has created a bit of a controversy for some fans because, and quite frankly, some radio and media experts as well, questioning whether or not these two should be in attendance. And I don't know where you stand on this, Dallas, but it seems to me two guys coming off pretty significant injuries that are veterans that have played a lot of football. I guess I'm in the I don't care that they're not in OTAs club.
I'm right there with you on that. These are veterans that have been on the team multiple years. Brooks is coming off of a torn ACL. Adams is coming off of a little bit more impactful of an injury that it tends to take a lot longer to come back from. However, like you said, both these guys are veterans and they've been here for a while. There should be no issue them missing OTAs. And really, this really shouldn't be that big of a story. It's not that important that they're missing OTAs. And I get it. OTAs is the first action for fans for the next upcoming season. It's like when you're coming home and you smell dinner cooking and you just want the food to be ready. Yet, it's not always going to be ready. And sometimes you got to wait a little longer. So fans, I get it. But at the end of the day, these guys are recovering from injury and they need to get back to 100%. And that should be the main focus.
Yeah, I think that a lot of this vitriol right now is mainly being aimed at Jamal Adams. And there's some reasons behind that. He has had multiple injuries. We've seen the fused fingers. We've seen the multiple torn labrums in his shoulder that have ended his season. And then last year, the torn quad tendon suffered in the first half of their season opener when he was trying to bring former teammate Russell Wilson to the ground on a blitz. He missed the entire rest of the season, the last 16 regular season games, as well as their playoff game. And so that has created some issues for fans. They are tired of seeing the highest paid player on the roster not be available and him not being here, and he's making posts on social media. And again, I don't care about any of this stuff. If he wants to post videos running on a treadmill, I mean, to me, I enjoy seeing that because it shows the progress he's making. And I think I would have had a different opinion on this 5 years ago. I think if we were having this discussion in 2017 or 2018 Dallas, I probably would be sitting here playing more of, you should be a team player. You should be here. It's all about competition for Pete Carroll. You need to be there, even if you can't participate. Be there with your teammates. Be there to learn the rookies. Be there to instruct some of the younger players. And all of those things you can make some arguments still for, but if I'm Pete Carroll and John Schneider, and this is what the vibe I've gotten from what they've said publicly, at least the last couple of weeks, this is the vibe I've gotten from them. I think that they are totally cool with Jamal Adams and Jordyn Brooks being back in Texas with the people that they have been working with this entire offseason. And they're both making good progress. So you want to continue that. And yes, could you have a program set up for those two in Seattle? Absolutely. But I just personally think standing around in shorts and a t-shirt, I just don't see much of a gain for those two guys when they can be staying back in Texas and working with their trainers, working with all their people as they've been doing for the last several months. And I just think that it's something that people are getting in an uproar about that, quite frankly, they shouldn't be. But again, Jamal Adams, I think a lot of it is frustration that he just hasn't been out in the field and playing to the contract that they gave him a couple years ago.
That has to be what the frustration is. And I get it. It's the contract and everything and the amount of injuries that have kind of added up at this point. Yet when he's on the field, we have all seen how impactful of a player he is. He's a defensive weapon, and that's what the Seahawks need. When he's out there, it's unquestionable. The energy that he brings to the defense, everyone feeds off of that. And that's what the Seahawks need. They need him back at 100% health. And again, that needs to be the only focus. Who cares if he's not here for OTAs, as you said, in shorts, watching the practices? He needs to be at 100% focusing on rehab. And that should be the main focus and the only focus for both players.
Yeah, and I think we can, as you said, for both players, we can say this with Brooks as well. He has not had the injury issues. He's been out there, he's been productive, but he's now going into the final year of his rookie contract. And so the player in the back of his mind, he wants to be on the field. He wants to get back out there, but he also doesn't want to rush back. And you can say that for both these guys, especially with Adams' injury history. But coming off a torn ACL, Brooks is making good progress, but you don't want to push it a step too far beyond the line and then have a re-aggravation of that injury, or in worst case scenario, re-injure it to the point that you have to have another surgery. We have seen that happen before, not often, but coming back too soon would be an issue. And so the Seahawks are going to be cautious with this. John Schneider has talked about that. They don't know if Jamal Adams is going to be ready for training camp. They don't know if Brooks is going to be ready. Carroll seems a little more optimistic on the Brooks front with him just coming back from a clean ACL tear, saying that he's going to be cutting it very close. That's a much different picture being painted than we had back at the combine when it sounded like it was really a long shot for him to be ready. So he is making good progress. They are not going to halt that by forcing these guys to come out for voluntary OTAs. And I'm going to continue to emphasize that. I get the arguments. Well, having them there, it's good for camaraderie and all that stuff. I understand that. But I think getting them healthy and having them in the right program to continue the rehab that is going ahead of schedule right now for both these guys, that is way more important to me than having them on the practice field just standing around kicking the can. That's just my viewpoint on it. And again, I probably would have thought differently 5 years ago, but things have changed. The league has changed. What we know about health and keeping players on the field has changed over the years. And so I just think with veterans like this that know the playbook, that have played a lot of football in the NFL, I just don't see the value in bringing them out there. Some people may disagree. That's fine. But that's where I stand at this point. And I just think people are getting in an uproar over nothing, that these two guys are not going to be in attendance at OTAs. Coming up next here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks, we're going to be taking another look at the depth chart. Rosters are pretty much set in stone. There will be a few changes here and there, but this is generally going to be what the Seattle Seahawks look like in 2023. We're going to break down the offensive depth chart and share our thoughts on the best position, most improved position, and much more. That'll be coming up here next on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious snack but don't want all the sugar and calories, then you need the best tasting protein bar ever, the Built Bar. If you're like me and you want to make healthier snack choices but don't want to compromise on taste, Built Bar and Built Puffs are the perfect solution for you. Covered in 100% real dark chocolate. They come in unbelievable flavors, including churro, peanut butter, brownie, my personal favorite, and cookies and cream. Only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. Now you don't have to wait around to get a box. For years, we've been telling you to order Built Bars at Built.com. Now you can grab them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club, and you can get your specialty flavors still at Built.com. That's right. Head on over to Walmart today. Get to the pharmacy section, and you can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate or coconut puff. And if you're near a Sam's Club, go in and get a 13-bar box. Go big or go home with brownie batter puff and churro puff. You can thank me later. You're listening to the Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined for today's show by my co-host, Dallas Cooper. And a special thanks to all the 12s out there, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. Everydayers, you want to make sure that you're tuning in tomorrow for our Blue Friday episode. Going to be playing Game Day, playing a little bit of What's the Odds, looking at Seattle's rookie class and expectations for the upcoming 2023 season. Should be a blast. Make sure that you are listening in. We are now on the verge of OTAs, Dallas. That means the roster for the Seahawks, while it's not completely set in stone, it's pretty close. This is probably going to be the team that you're going to be seeing for the Seahawks in 2023. And so it's time for us to look at the offensive depth chart again. And now that we have a real concrete look at this roster, look at it where the Seahawks have improved the most, the best position on offense, the biggest wild card, and of course, the area that maybe they missed the mark and didn't improve upon enough. So Dallas, let's look at that depth chart right now on the offensive side of the football. This is a team that is returning a lot of talent from a top 10 scoring offense last year. Geno Smith is back. Ken Walker III is back. DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, both of their tackles are now sophomores in the NFL, and Abe Lucas and Charles Cross. Damian Lewis is back. All 3 of their tight ends are back. There's a lot of continuity here, and yet, Dallas, there have been some big switch-ups here with free agency and mostly in the draft, adding players that can be impact players right away for this team on offense. So let's start this discussion off looking at that depth chart with all these returning pieces. What position, in your opinion, is the best position on Seattle's offense right now?
To me, without a doubt, it has to be receiver. You have DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. Just this past season, DK Metcalf, 90 receptions, 1,048 yards, 6 touchdowns. Lockett, 84 receptions, 1,033 yards, 9 touchdowns. Everyone knows this has to be the best position group for the Seahawks offense. It's who they rely on. And this past season, it showed. Geno relied on these 2 receivers, and Geno played great as well. Yet these 2 receivers were the backbone of the offense and who they needed. Yet we'll talk about it next, but they also added a couple studs in that group as well.
Yeah, bringing in Jackson Smith-Njigba, who's got the talent to be a 1,000-yard receiver himself in the NFL, to go with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. This was a pretty easy one for me in terms of the best overall position. You're talking about a former All-Pro in DK Metcalf. Tyler Lockett, I've made this argument in this show. He is quietly putting together a Hall of Fame caliber resume, even though he doesn't ever make All-Pro teams or Pro Bowl teams, aside from his kick returning early in his career. You got those 2. You invested a first-round pick in Jackson Smith-Njigba. And so that makes this a prime position with those 3. And I also would be remiss not to mention, I still think Derek Young is a name to watch out for too. And D. Eskridge is still on the roster. Eskridge has had his injury issues that have really prevented him from coming anywhere close to meeting expectations. But maybe now with Smith-Njigba coming into town, there's going to be a little more of a fire lit under D. Eskridge. And we know he's got talent. So from top to bottom, to me, this is the best position group for the Seahawks. And you mentioned him. We're talking most improved. Bringing in Jackson Smith-Njigba makes it pretty easy to make the argument that that position can also be the selection in that category as well.
And exactly right. And that's why it was my selection. For most improved on offense, I have to stick with it, the receiver room. And Jackson Smith-Njigba, as much as everyone is excited for the ceiling of the offense to kind of go through the roof, more so, I think he provides a necessary floor. Defenses aren't going to be able to focus specifically on Metcalf or Lockett. There's always going to be one person to go to. And what a third option that is to have in Smith and Jigba. And let's not also forget in the undrafted free agency, they secured a guy, Matt Landers, who was a 6'4" X receiver out of Arkansas. And he played at Georgia early in his career. And you're talking about a guy who's great at the deep ball, tracking it over his shoulder, contorting his body for back shoulder throws. This might be a guy that comes up and becomes a huge red zone threat as early as this season.
Yeah, if Matt Landers ends up landing a spot on this 53-man roster with the other talent that we just mentioned there, then that just makes this group that much better. And he has that elite ability downfield with 4.3 speed at 6'4". Those are the kind of players you're always going to watch out for in this offense. I'm actually going a little different direction here, though. I'm going to the backfield for my most improved group, the running back group, because this was a group last year plagued by injuries. Rashad Penny played really well, then got hurt again. Travis Homer missed a good chunk of the season. You really were stuck with Ken Walker III and DJ Dallas, and those two did a fine job. Walker was the runner-up for Offensive Rookie of the Year, but you bring in a battering ram in Zach Charbonnet, who also can catch the football like a receiver, a different style runner than Ken Walker. He really is that guy that gets downhill quick, and he dishes out punishment. He drags, finish authority. Got underrated, I think, as a 1-2 punch that those two guys should be as dangerous as any group in the NFL. You've still got DJ Dallas, and then you're able to get Kenny McIntosh, a guy that I had a second or third round grade on, late second, early third round grade as my number 5 running back. You get him in the 7th round at pick 237, maybe the best pure third down back prospect in this draft class with incredibly soft hands. So you have those 4 guys. I just think that's a really fun group with great depth, a lot of different types of ball carriers and receivers out of the backfield. So that group to me is the most improved. Now let's get to the biggest what if. And this could be a wild card. It could be a position group that you're looking at like, if everything pans out, it could be a lot of fun. If it doesn't, this could derail the offense. What is the biggest what if position for you on this Seahawks offense that quite frankly has a lot of star power across the board?
I have to go with right guard. I actually like what the Seahawks did for the center position, and I definitely could see why it would be people's biggest what if. But for me, it's right guard simply because of the amount of snaps that were played from both people that are going to be competing for the spot. Anthony Bradford is coming in as a rookie, going to be competing, coming out of LSU, extremely powerful, really good run blocker, and very underrated as a pass protector. You're not going to bull rush him, really good anchor. And yet, also from last season, you're bringing back Phil Haynes. Now, Phil Haynes wasn't the starter last season. He rotated a lot with Gabe Jackson, playing 485 snaps. That's limited in snaps. That was, I think, 65th in terms of guards. Again, just because of the low snap production out of both these guys in the NFL, and for Bradford, none, it's a really big what if to me. This really could be fun if it pans out, as you said, but there is a high risk to this at that position.
Yeah, the lack of snaps, right guard was the second pick for me, but I'm going to go with the position next to it. And I think that center is a position that has a pretty high ceiling, but I'm worried about where the floor is at with this competition coming up, because Oluwatimi, as good as he was at Michigan, there are some clips that you can watch from last year where you can maybe create some questions about where his athleticism fits, particularly in the zone blocking game. And sometimes interior rushers were able to get past him if they had the athleticism to do so. He's not necessarily a great athlete for the position. And Evan Brown, I like the film from his time starting in Detroit, replacing Ragnow at center a couple years ago. He had one start last year and he looked really good. But you're talking again about a guy that hasn't played a ton of games in the NFL. And last year when he started at right guard, there were some struggles. And so I like both players. And I think if they are able to mesh with this offensive scheme, both of them could be upgrades over what Austin Blythe was last year. But I could also see this being a situation if Oluwatimi is not able to come in right away from a physicality and athleticism standpoint when the pads come on. He's going to impress right now with his knowledge and his experience. But if he has some issues adapting from the physicality and size and athleticism standpoint, or Evan Brown is not able to play near the level he did a couple years ago in Detroit, then you could still have a big gaping hole in the middle of your offensive line. And so I just view it as one of those that has a very wide gap in terms of what we could see this year. And Seattle just needs that player. They're hoping Oluwatimi can be that foundational center they've been looking for. Maybe Evan Brown is still that guy. We're going to find out. But I think that there's a lot of boomer bust to this position. And last but not least, I mean, it is least, but the least upgraded, the position that maybe the Seahawks missed an opportunity to improve upon. I thought that this was pretty tough on offense because they did do some moves on offensive line with center and guard. They added receivers. They added running backs. They brought back both their quarterbacks. So I really don't know that there's anything that jumps out glaring here, Dallas, but there was one position group that came to mind, and I think you and I agreed upon that maybe Seattle could have found a way to improve that they didn't.
The tight end class. And for me, it was because of this past draft. There was a really good tight end class, and there was multiple opportunities to get later round tight ends, yet they decided not to do it. And the only reason why wasn't upgraded enough is because there's only one tight end under contract after this upcoming season. So therefore, it's going to be an issue. It's not a need now, but it's going to be a need next season. So it would have been very interesting to see if they wanted to get ahead of it. They chose not to, so it's going to be interesting to see how they do that next season.
Yeah, I still like this tight end group with Will Dissly, Noah Fant, Kobe Parkinson. I still like all three of those players, and Mabry has done some things when he's had his opportunities. So it was not an immediate need. We talked about this the entire pre-draft process. I feel like if there would have been a certain player that would have fallen a little bit further, like a Sam Laporta, for example, if that player would have been available a little bit later in the draft, I think John Schneider would have had a hard time passing up on that type of a talent, very similar to what they did with Charbonnet at running back. I think if the right tight end is there, that they would have pulled the trigger. But there was never that situation where they felt like this is the best pick for us to make. And so with the depth and talent they had coming back, they decided not to add anybody there. But I do think next year that's going to be a position that potentially could be a major area of need with Parkinson and Fant set to become free agents. And we know Will Dissly's injury history as well. Let's flip the script here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith, joined by Dallas Cooper. And a special thanks to all the 12s out there, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. Let's look at the defensive depth chart now, shall we? And this is a side of the ball that's had a lot bigger turnover, a lot more reconstruction, and it needed it because the defense at times was pretty poor last year, especially defending the run. And they were much more aggressive in free agency with this group, Dallas. They bring back Bobby Wagner. Devin Bush is brought in. Julian Love to add to that safety group. Draymond Jones is the big fish. Jaron Reed back in Seattle. So 5 marquee free agent additions to bolster this group. And they also added some very intriguing players in the draft, including number 5 overall pick Devin Witherspoon, who we both expect is going to be starting for the Seahawks on day 1, across from Tariq Woolen, Derek Hall, their second-round pick. So let's get to the awards in each position group here. What, in your opinion, looking at this totally overhauled defense, what is the best position group for the Seahawks heading into 2023 on defense?
To me, it's the cornerback group. And Corbin, I know we talked about this before the show. There's a little bit of argument here with the back 7 on which position group you wanted to go with, safety or cornerback. And there is valid arguments for both sides. However, I think it's corner. And being that Tariq Woolen is a young up-and-coming star in this league with the potential to get even better and better and better. His untapped potential is probably could be the best corner we have ever seen, just due to his pure physical traits. Never have we seen a 6'4" corner running 4.2 speed. It's insane just to think about. Then you add in Devon Witherspoon with the number 5 pick. And as we talked about it, Corbin, countless times, Pete Carroll talked about how he's reminded of Troy Polamalu when talking about him. How can you not be excited with adding Tariq Woolen with a guy that reminds Pete Carroll of Troy Polamalu? I think that would be amazing, and that's got to be their best overall position.
I was leaning towards corner for the reasons you mentioned, the fact that Mike Jackson was a solid starter last year, and now he's going to be a really good backup behind Witherspoon and Woolen. You've still got Trey Brown, who I still like, coming off that injury last year, wasn't able to get back in the starting lineup. You got Kobe Bryant in the slot. He can play outside. That's where he played and was the Jim Thorpe Award winner at Cincinnati. So there's a lot of depth and a lot of talent there. But I still got to go safety. And this is assuming that Jamal Adams is able to make it back 100%. We'll have to wait and see on that front. But Quandre Diggs finished last year really strong, made his third straight Pro Bowl team. He started kind of rough out of the gate, but he was coming off a significant injury himself. And once he was able to get his confidence back in that leg, we started to see the Quandre Diggs of old. Julian Love is a really fun and versatile player that has started games at both safety spots, in the slot. He's even played outside corner before. The guy is a jack of all trades. He's only 26, really athletic. So I think he is going to be a fun fit there. And the wild card in all this, I tweeted about it yesterday. You will not find a person in the Seahawks facility right now that is not gushing about Jarek Reed II, their 6th-round pick out of New Mexico. And I don't know where he fits into the equation here. Right now, it's going to be difficult because of everybody that's in front of him. But this seems to be a kid that they are very excited about his future with the franchise. And so you bring in a player like that that's getting those kind of reviews from coaches and from scouts, people within the building, his new teammates raving about him. That is a name to keep a close eye on. I just think from top to bottom, depth chart wise, that is still the best position for them. And again, this is assuming Jamal Adams makes it back healthy. If he's not able to do that, then I would probably be leaning corner with Devin Witherspoon being added to the equation. Now, let's talk most improved. And this is one that I think you and I are going to have vastly different opinions on. But you actually picked a group that I hadn't thought of much because there was only one notable addition. But that one addition in your mind really is a game changer.
The edge group. And to me, it's because simply you hinted at it prior to talking about this side of the ball. The run defense was a huge issue last season. You had Uchenna Nwosu on one side, and at times, to be honest, the other side, it was a little scary seeing who was out there. So you had Bruce Irvin getting snaps out there, and again, that was not the plan going into the season, but that was obviously not something that you wanted. You did not want 35-year-old Bruce Irvin taking snaps, especially starting, having to be a run defender because Darrell Taylor couldn't hold up on first and second downs in the run game. You needed someone to be able to come in and be able to help out with the run defense. You added in Boye Mafe last year, who was probably one of your best edge setters in his rookie year. And coming off of that, you're going to add in another dude in Derek Hall, who's going to probably be even better just due to his physical size. Very similar to Nwosu, and I think that's what the Seahawks needed. They needed two guys to be able to edge set on each side of the defense.
And Hall brings the 4.5 speed and the ability to win with power off the edge, really good pass rushing production in the SEC. And so I didn't consider the edge rushing group here, but certainly you can make an argument if Hall ends up living up to that first-round grade that they vastly improved that group, at least at the top, putting him with Uchenna Nwosu. For me, as far as most improved, I'm going to linebacker because, you've got to consider when Bobby Wagner's back in town. Big number 54 back in the middle. All-pro selection last year, and he deserved to be an all-pro selection. Still a very fine middle linebacker. And you bring in Devin Bush, a player that, to me, is a bit more of a project at this point because he had that ACL injury in Pittsburgh, and he hasn't been able to rediscover his rookie form. But he's only 24, so you're taking your chances that with his age that he is going to be able to return to that previous form. And then Jordyn Brooks, as we talked about in the first quarter, it looks like he's got a chance to be ready at some point in training camp. You get him back with Bobby Wagner and Devin Bush. That's suddenly a pretty fun group. And I even like John Radigan as their fourth guy in that group. And so linebacker would be my most improved group, just on the sense that you're bringing back a future Hall of Famer in Bobby Wagner. Devin Bush is a nice former first-round pick to take a flyer on. So that's going to be a fun group. With that being said, and I'm going to have to explain this one a little bit here, as far as the biggest what-if position group, I'm also going with linebacker there because as enticing as Bobby Wagner coming back and Devin Bush joining him and Jordyn Brooks coming back from injury is, there's a lot of question marks there. Bobby Wagner is going to be 33. At some point, there are going to be signs of decline. And there's already been some in terms of athleticism in the last couple of years. He's been able to offset that because of how savvy he is football IQ-wise and just a phenomenal player. But what does he look like at this stage of his career coming back in a defense? It's probably going to be a little different than what he played in with the Rams. Jordyn Brooks coming off an ACL. Anytime a guy's coming off a severe knee injury, you don't know what to expect. And then Devin Bush, as I mentioned, has not been the same player the last couple of years for Pittsburgh since he had his own ACL injury. So while there's a high ceiling there, it's kind of similar to the center group as we talked about on offense. I also could see this being a group that if Bobby Wagner takes a step back, Brooks isn't able to come back to form, and or Devin Bush is not able to rediscover his rookie form, you suddenly have a group that still has major question marks there. And so that is the biggest what if for me.
I'm right there with you on that. The biggest what if for me is also the inside linebacker position, being for all the reasons that you said. Injury history, age for Bobby Wagner, and just the unknown. There's a lot of unknown going into this season at this position. Is Jordyn Brooks going to be ready for the start of the season? When is he going to be ready by? Is Devin Bush going to be able to come back after the ACL tear a couple years ago and refine his form? Is Bobby Wagner going to be able to fight father time again for another year and be able to keep up with NFL wide receivers on routes? Running backs trying to get outside. A lot of question marks. But again, could go really well with a great ceiling. And again, as you said, the talent that these players have is not the question. Absolutely not. These middle linebackers on this team have immense talent. It's all about production on the field. And are they going to be healthy enough to give the production? That's the biggest question mark. So right there, I agree with you on this.
Yeah, to me, this is all about health with this group. And you can mention with Bobby Wagner age. I mean, he's been really, really durable for most of his career, but he is getting to be an older linebacker, and the other two have had the knee injuries. And so there are some question marks there. That's why, again, I see some boomer bust. Now let's talk the least upgraded. And I think you and I are going to be on the same tangent here with this defense, where Seattle maybe missed the chance to upgrade the most or improve this defense. Although I think that maybe you're looking a little more broadly, whereas I'm going to be more specific here.
For me, it's the interior defensive line in general. And I don't specifically mean nose tackle. I mean nose tackle, 3-tech, your big end. And to me, it's because I like the 3-tech additions. Your 3-techs are going to be Mike Morris, Draymond Jones. Nose tackle, you got Cameron Young coming in, and a couple undrafted free agents. Robert Cooper is going to be fighting for a spot. But the 4-eye position, or if you're going to play bear, it's going to be 2-3 techniques. But if you're checking into under, you're going to have a 4-eye playing inside of a tackle. And I'm worrying about that position because right now, Jarran Reed is supposed to be playing there. And watching the film of Jarran Reed when he was on the Packers last year, it's a little scary, especially being with how much money that the Seahawks tied with him. I think there could have been much more ways to lessen what your expectations should be coming into the season for him, lessen the snap count expectation. But I could see why John Schneider did have faith in it, hoping that Clint Hurt can bring him back to form. And again, if Clint Hurt does bring him back to form, that would be an excellent addition to the defense.
Yeah, I'm more optimistic on the 3-tech and 4-eye position players and the big ends. I think Mike Morris is going to be a lot of fun playing that position. There's going to be some growing pains, but at 295, 300 pounds with his athleticism, I think he's going to be a problem in there. Draymond Jones has a chance to truly break out in this defense, hence why they gave him the contract they did. And I think Jarran Reed, whether he's starting, which right now I would say he probably is your other starter with Draymond Jones. I don't think Mike Morris is starting right away, but I still think that he has enough left in the tank that he can give them some valuable snaps in that role and still maybe rush the passer a little bit. My concern still lies at nose tackle because you lose Al Woods, who goes to the Jets for a little over $2 million for this year. And the fact the Seahawks could not keep him on that type of a contract, it's frustrating because he's still a very good player. You don't know when Brian Monet is going to be back. That's a guy coming off injury that I expect is going to miss at least half the season, coming back from an ACL tear. And he had some additional damage in that injury too. And those 340-plus pound guys, it can be tougher for them to get back from knee injuries. So you're going to be counting on a 4th-round pick in Cameron Young from day one. Robert Cooper is an undrafted guy, probably gets drafted last year and then has the injury. So there's upside there. Jonah Tavai is a very unique talent playing nose tackle as a situational 3rd down pass rushing nose. He could be a thorn in opposing center and guards sides, but he's 5'10", 283 pounds. So it's not like he's a guy that's going to be playing extensive snaps early for you in that role. I just look at that as a position where they had a chance to still maybe go out and get some veterans that could help. They've signed some guys in the last week, but I don't think any of them are starter caliber players that are going to jump in. I mean, Forrest Merrill's not going to be starting for him in week 1. So I just think it's still a position group. Yes, if your rookies pan out, yeah, you're going to be fine. But if those guys are not able to elevate their game quickly and then Jaron Reed's not contributing as a nose for you, I just think that has a chance to be a position that still blows up in Seattle's faces during the 2023 season. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Dallas at Dallas C. Cooper. Subscribe and follow Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts to ensure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up tomorrow, it's Blue Friday. We will be diving into game day. What's the odds for Seattle's 10-player draft class? Maybe mixing in a few undrafted free agents into the game as well. It's going to be a lot of fun. Hope you'll be listening in. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Go Hawks.